wonderful. Here we are.
And here we are. Well, I wanted to say that, hey, one of my favorite things about the last conversation we had was how real you were.
Very honest. I really want to lead with, being authentic and transparent, because you offer such a amazing perspective to situations, and it allows me to be able to navigate them in ways that I might not have normally thought of before. So being honest and transparent with you is the best way to get, an expected outcome that I'm looking for.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
You also get to see that you want it, right?
I do.
And I feel that a lot of women have made more of a commitment not believing that it exists.
Yeah.
And they have kind of had that spiral, that thing that they're looking for is nothing but a fantasy fairy tale, and that they should seek empowerment through their masculine presentation of themselves as a woman.
Definitely.
And yeah, and then when you finally could see that, wait, no, I could live with that. I noticed that women really, really want to.
Yeah.
When they're given a path and they know that there's a way, they're like, please sign me up.
Absolutely.
Maybe I am a problem. And I'm okay with that, because
Yeah.
I think in the face of love, I think we're okay to let go of what we think we are to ourselves. We're okay to let go of that prosthetic arm. That's nothing more than a piece of plastic that we say is everything we need.
Yeah. And I was reading through the comments in the last videos, and people were so upset because they have one perspective or the other, but just being open-minded and exchanging other people's ideas and perspectives is really part of what helps you grow as a person. And I really appreciate learning new things from you and having a different input on how I might view things differently than you. Even if it is a debate style, it's still a learning experience for both of us, right?
That's the beautiful part about it. I love seeing. This is the beautiful thing about vulnerability. And this is what I wanted to talk about, because it's something you wanted to share with me, because I know that you really wanted my insight and my coaching around you coming out of a relationship, and I want to make that what this is about. But vulnerability is putting yourself in a position of how that thing has happened every time, and this time not protecting your heart but speaking from your heart, meaning you're not predicting the answer of what they're going to say.
Right.
So you're interacting with the future, and the future that's reflective of your past that has existed your whole life. So it heals you looking back and looking forward. It's a new horizon. It's not the old story. It's one you've never experienced.
Right.
And that's the effect of someone who's courageous enough to do that.
Yeah.
Because I know that you just came out of a relationship, so why not, let's just start there.
Yeah, so I was seeing this guy, and the vulnerability conversation, it came up a few times right off the get-go. He had communicated that he didn't feel as though I was being vulnerable enough with him. Meanwhile, I was walking into it thinking logically, like, I'm being as open and honest and transparent with you as possible. And he really did teach me a lot of ways to be more vulnerable, which I'm very grateful for.
How so?
I think when you're dating someone, you put up a mask of how you want them to perceive you, just to protect yourself. And so you might not give the full story. So for example, if he was to ask me, how was your day? I'd be like, oh, my day is great. But instead of being very open and vulnerable about things that went wrong, during that day, I would just mask it. And so I think that was part of it, is just the simple surface level conversation was very, not vulnerable. And then when we got to deeper topics, like talking about my childhood or talking about his prior relationships, it was just really
talking
hard.
about somebody's relationship with sex will tell you a lot.
Yeah, it was really, I don't want to say awkward, but you could just feel like the energies didn't align, and we both weren't able to be vulnerable.
I really like that. Okay, so what you said is that the second you started talking about things that weren't superficial, you noticed that there wasn't a relationship.
Exactly, we didn't align.
I'll say it again. You noticed there wasn't a relationship.
Yeah.
So what were you in a relationship with?
An idea.
Well, it was a narcissistic projection of a way for you to interact with what you thought they could be to help you interact with yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you're like recognizing your poor commitment with you and then going into a relationship expecting that to manifest into anything other than dissatisfaction, right? Like, no, this looks just like your poor commitment to life and to your life.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to go deeper here with you is, I was talking with a girl the other day, and one of the conversations I brought up was her relationship with sex, and she immediately got triggered.
And she pulled away?
And she pulled away. And I said, excuse me, did I say something? And she's like, well, I think that you're really superficial. And I said, oh, would you rather go back to you projecting your Christian worldview onto me and having all of these puritanistic ideas around what kind of guy I am? Or would you like to find out?
Ooh, I like that.
And I think what's superficial is your relationship with sex. And you could speak for yourself if that's how you feel about it, but that's not how I feel about it.
Right.
Because I want to get to know you.
Yeah.
And if that's not something you're interested in, I don't need to be having this conversation, because already by seeing your reaction, I'm getting turned off.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt, actually, is I had an idea of the type of man he was, and his relationship. What was that?
I'm curious. That'll share a lot about your heart.
His relationship with sex, he just didn't value sex as much as I think you should, from my perspective.
Well, it's interesting. This is going to be the fun stuff.
Yeah.
That you probably don't like.
Yeah, and there was like red flags. Like I saw so many red flags, social media, for example, his interaction with other women, for example. And it just really showed me that his ideals around sexuality did not align with my own. And that should have been one of the main reasons why I walked away sooner than I did. But I was so hung up on that idea or potential of having a good relationship with somebody that I hung on to it for so long. And looking back on it now, I did learn a lot about how to be more vulnerable, I think. But I also learned if you don't align, right off the get-go, you need to kind of walk away and reevaluate what your own values are before pursuing someone that doesn't have the same values as you.
Well, this is what I was talking to you before, is that you've adopted unconscious naivete. And that's your protective mechanism from these truths that exist, right? Because let's be real. If you actually were to have the honest conversations with a person before you even got naked with them, which I find really interesting. People are more willing to get naked with each other than be naked in the conversation. And it's like, what's more courageous? And I noticed something about women who have created disassociation, is that there's two bodies women have. They have an emotional body and a physical body. They're the same one, but they tell themselves, that they're different. Some women go, as long as you see my physical body, here I am.
Yes.
And then they hide the emotions. And there's other women who put the emotions in front and the body behind.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is they're never really interacting with you, because neither are you with yourself. So at any point where they're not, meeting your emotional needs, eventually then slowly you use it. But at the end of the day, I just gave you an elaborate definition of transaction, meaning that you're not living with who you are, and that you're trying to get them to do something that allows you to bring who you are to the surface. Yeah. So you have a conditional relationship with yourself and a transactional relationship with them and a conditional relationship between each other. And so, you find yourself in this position to where you're noticing a little bit of distance that you have between your own emotions. And I noticed something about people's relationship with their emotions is like, people talk about it like it's the raccoon in the tree in your backyard. And it's like, one second, right? Like, what is your beliefs about life? Like, what is the meaning of all of this? Like, do you attribute that to any of this? And most people just go, no, like, fuck no. Why do you think I want to feel sad today? I'm just working, Or why do I want to have that conversation with a guy like that when, and you have this voice in your head, when I could just not ask?
And you distract with sex.
Well, let's go back to that. Sex is one way to avoid that, but that's just a way to scratch an itch that you have of a deep desire for connection. So what instead you would rather do, is opposed to addressing all of your insecurities around connection, what you do instead is you sex a projected form of sex, which is, by the way, it's not with them, it's probably not even that great. And the thing is, most people bond with themselves in the bedroom, not with the other person, so it's not really, it's like a narcissistic sex, but what ends up happening is that they experience everything about themselves that they wanted to experience by making that person something they're not. So did they really have sex with that person? No. Let me guess. He was probably into his ex?
Yeah, he was still in love with her.
Nobel Peace Prize. Send it over.
Yeah. He had voiced that to me, that he was still in love with his ex.
Because he was just making love with her until he realized you're you, and then he's like, the fuck, my dick don't work anymore.
Yeah, literally.
Right? Yeah, it's devastating.
So what would you recommend then? As a woman, do you recommend withholding sex entirely until you're like married?
Zero,
or like
zero.
what's the timeline on that?
That's such a great question.
Yeah, what's the timeline on that transaction, I guess?
Elaborate a little bit more.
So how do you know when you're ready to have sex with a man as a woman?
Well, like what you said before, you said, what, do you just like hold back on it until you're like ready to get married? Yeah,
do you just wait to have sex until you're actually in a committed, like ring on the finger type of relationship? Or when is the proper time to share that experience with someone?
Oh, when you feel connected is the right answer.
But what if you're not connected with yourself? Then how can you feel connected to them?
Beautiful, right? And so you could even say, well, then sex is probably off the table, right? Especially if you're going to accept that sex has two things involved, connection and children. And at least let's start with one, and maybe we'll get to the other, right? But if you're not even going to acknowledge either of them and you're going to have sex, then you're probably not having sex. You're having what you call what most people have now, which is the means to their psychological liberation. So they use sex as a way to feel a certain way about themselves.
Like a validation almost?
Yeah, you're not having sex. You're feeding your dysfunctions through sex and distorting your expression of sex because of your psychological dysfunctions through sex.
So it's really important then
stuff.
to feel connected to yourself and really do the work within yourself before you entertain dating at all.
Well, of course, if you don't know how to be alone with you, you'll meet somebody who makes you wish that you were alone.
Yeah.
And that's been something that I've been repeating lately because it really struck a chord with me. Like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want to build? And also, now here's something interesting. I spoke about the emotional body and physical body. It's really important for women, right? Because, a majority of your sexual experience isn't even desire.
What is that?
Well, what you desire is what you're making him.
Okay.
That's not him.
The potential piece?
Well, that potential piece, the thing that you did with him, which was not ask him about his sexual behaviors. Because you might notice what brings two people together is their value system, and then here's the other thing, and the traumas you share. So the value system is there to help you reflect on how you would like this to manifest. So if you don't share the value system, then that means you guys both have maybe these core level wounds that exist between both of you. And it's really beautiful because there's great depth there, right? You guys could be in a place where you both understand. But if that's the case and you don't have a system of values to reflect on what you're going to be like when you're there, you'll destroy each other when you're down there. And you're going to tell each other that you're against one another when really you're actually in the same place, and it's here for you guys to maybe push against the corners of the wall to really see what this is between each other. And that's a healing space.
That's something I actually really liked, is that we were so both disconnected in so many ways. I felt as though it was easy for us to understand each other, which I know sounds so backwards.
Yeah.
But we had a very similar upbringing, very similar traumas growing up. And that was a big stopping point for him, where he was like, this is never going to work because we're just so similar. Whereas I was looking at it like, this is great. We understand exactly how we both think and how we both work.
Do you see the difference in values there?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, different manifestation.
Yeah.
Right? We have all of these fucked up things. Yes, and that's why we can work through it together.
Right.
And by the way, all the more so, because I would only want to treat you the way that I would treat myself.
Exactly.
And I made a commitment to addressing this before I met you.
Exactly.
So maybe let's do it together. You can't ask that from anybody else who doesn't have that value system. But what I was trying to say earlier is that if you're creating this distance from the things that you value, your emotions, your sexuality connected to your desires, meaning you have a desire for connection. Not everybody you can connect with, by the way, even if they're your perfect one direction fantasy. Like, that's just not how it's going to work. You're making that something that it's not. Like, go ahead and meet Harry Styles. You probably won't connect with him. Like, that's the whole point, right? But what you're interacting with is everything internally that you would like to be met, that you don't meet yourself, that you project onto men, that makes you codependent to them. And I think there's dependency between men and women. Codependency is never healthy and makes men and women enemies to each other. Because, oh, you're restricting my freedom. And he's like, well, fucking hell, you're restricting my freedom, right? And it's not even that elaborate because it's the same thing to each other. But here's what I wanted to say. When it came to the conversation of sex, it's really important. Like, when should you be able to have sex with somebody? I'm not here to tell people when or when not to. I'm just telling them to be honest with themselves. And if they realize that their sexual expression wasn't even about sex, they would be less likely to have it with those people. If they actually got to know the people's relationship with sex, how they want to raise their children, what is their relationship with their family, and their past relationships, they wouldn't be so quick to jumping into bed with them, because you would be asking conversations to them that they would then ask to you, and then whatever blurry projection and all of your unconfronted desperation comes up to the surface. Maybe you don't want that, but let's just say you do. And then now you're interacting with something you're going to feel fear about. And so now this is what I want to tell to every woman here and to every man that has that, that maybe that desire to feel that sex is going to solve something. Here's what it's going to do. If you break the projection and you integrate these parts of yourself that you have already confirmed don't exist, you will feel fear. And you'll be able to do that with about 5 people in your life. And that's okay to maybe go, well, I'm not there. I am not there. All right. Well, maybe see how you're not there, because you're having somebody utilize sex as a way to meet a need that sex doesn't meet.
Yeah, and that's why I stopped having sex with men. Like, truly, I took a really long break from sleeping with men, because before, I had met him, I do value sex. It's very important to me.
Well, how about this? You value security. I don't think you value sex.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. That's true.
Yeah, because a lot of women say that.
True.
They're like, I value sex. It's like, no, you don't. You value security.
I want to feel safe.
And you use sex as a form of transaction to gain that security.
It's
so you have a
leverage.
different price, right? You're still transactional.
So true.
And a lot of women say that. And by the way, they talk about the perversion of people casually hooking up. You're just as perverted when you use sex this way.
Yeah.
Perversion, just to get this out of people's heads, because you're probably a dirty monkey like me, because we all are, is it's taking the thing as it is and making it something that it's not. That's called a perversion, right? And people do that all the time. They play it on the religious spin of it, like, oh, sex is this union of two souls. Like, how did you get here again? Okay, because your dad wanted to fuck your mom? Yeah, that's the real story. Okay, got it. What about this union of two souls thing? But that does exist, right?
Yeah.
But to make that the picture because of the other part of you that's an animal diminishes what the animal contributes to the divine, that is divine itself, opposed to, what happens is women have a new form of transaction, which is, I value sex. No, you value security.
Yeah.
Do you even know your values around sex? And you go, I don't, because if I valued sex, I'd be having it. Now, what kind of sex would I be having is the real question. And how many people can give me that kind of sex?
Yeah,
That's
what are the categories of types of sex?
Well, first, when you establish what you're looking for is security, you're left with sex as an expression of yourself and many needs that you have. So it's a very vulnerable expression. How many people are going to understand the needs you're expressing through sex?
Not very many.
Not very many, right?
Yeah.
And so if people are afraid of a promiscuity in them, that's typically created when you disconnect people from sexuality. Like, if people who are very connected to their sexuality are not promiscuous because they value sexuality. Because for me, it's not a question of like, oh, would we fuck right here? It's like, yeah, well, let's do it. But I want you to hear me out here. Do you have that same kind of relationship with this thing to value and understand that we're going to be meeting deep needs for each other in this process?
Right.
And if they have it, go for it, And by the way, you'll be left with another set of problems, which is, I am deeply bonded to this person, and we are moving quite fast. That's fair. It depends. You got to know your speed too.
Yeah.
So as long as you know what game you're playing and what you're doing and how honest you are with yourself throughout it, you can have very powerful connections with people without having to make it about your system of values as to why you're not.
Okay. Can you expand more on how sexuality is tied to femininity?
Oh, that's interesting. It's deeply tied to femininity. That's I want to think about this. Most people aren't horny. They're just sad, or they don't know how to experience their emotions and use horny as a way to avoid it. And the problem with that is that could disconnect a woman from her femininity, because her femininity implies emotional integration with sexual expression.
Okay.
And so if you have disassociative sexual expression, right, which is very much like, oh, I don't really care, it's fine, it's just casual,
for like
it's no big
physical
deal.
Pleasure, essentially.
Yeah, but when you see what you're doing, you're separating yourself from the thing that really fulfills you, right? So what happens is you start to create a split. And what happens to women that create splits, this also happens with men, is that the people that satisfy their sexual desires become a different category of sexual expression to those that satisfy their emotional needs.
And they're not able to integrate the two.
Yes, and you know what happens is that when you have your emotional needs met by this woman called your wife, right, or your husband, you still have your primal needs that are kept as distance from you. So what happens is you think about the guy in college while fucking your husband. So this is God's way of helping people realize you cannot run from yourself, right? And so, look, we're at a point where the purpose of this page and this conversation is to help people realize that a disconnection is not something that you will benefit from.
Right.
And maybe you should be asking yourself the deeper questions that will revolutionize your life. Why isn't my aspiration true love? And to think that it's just going to happen, you don't want it to just happen.
It wouldn't happen the right way. It wouldn't be true.
Yeah, of course, you're going to experience exactly that. And so I notice that majority of people play into the youth of the matter, right? And that's the thing about youth, is it gets people to, waste it.
Yeah.
When we were just talking about someone that we work with, and you were noticing his youth and his capacity.
Yes.
Because of the environment he put himself in.
It elevated him.
Elevated him, right? And so this has nothing to do with people's age. And you think about young men and young women, these conversations are not being had, they're taboo. The conversation of sex is completely scattered and distorted when it's on everybody's mind. Everybody's sex obsessed in one way or another.
Yeah.
And it's because they've buried it in so many different ways. And now they've buried it even through sex. Do you know how crazy that is? That even sexuality itself has become pornography. And people are getting boners for porn. It's like, that doesn't exist. It never existed throughout human history. And so it's almost like we feel that we can trust ourselves even less, which goes to show, like, the internal confinements of your life need to be addressed. And so I would say for you, there was a deep emotional craving, a satisfaction of that part of you, right? Because when a person is a very masculine, and that's with quote, what they're really saying is your relationship with sex is juvenile. Women have a less juvenile relationship with sex, a more fearful relationship with it. They understand the consequences and vulnerabilities that come with it. Men are going to be a little more one-eyed in this regard, but you can tell a really masculine man based off his ability to integrate the animal along with the emotional, or you could say the spiritual and the animal together. And then that creates what you call room for you to be both of those. And this time he could lead that, kind of expanding the walls and you're in the center.
Okay.
So whenever I call any of my clients, male or female, one of the first conversations I have with them is going to be their sexual history. Their response will tell me everything about how they want this, and I know when they're lying, and I'll ask again. You know what's really interesting? It's like going to a doctor and he goes, where does it hurt? And then you point at your nose when your knee's broken.
Why?
That's exactly, that's a disconnect with why they're there, right?
Okay.
They're there to protect something, right? And so I have the awareness of these protective mechanisms. You have to see a little bit more of, do you believe that to be true?
The defensive mechanism?
Well, that you have a disconnected, disassociative relationship with sex like a juvenile man would.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
And what would you call that? How
Primal.
How do you see it?
I see it as primal.
As primal?
Yes, very just for physical reasons. There's no emotional connection. There's no purpose other than validation and physical pleasure.
Does it satisfy you?
Temporarily.
That's not satisfaction.
No.
Right? No, that's just scratching an itch.
Yeah, scratching an itch is a perfect way of putting it.
Well, you could think of it this way. Have you had sex with emotions?
I don't think I have.
That's really important to know, that
Yeah.
your relationship with your body is also your relationship with your emotions. As a woman, that's specific. Men who are very intuitive can develop that, but that's not true. There's a high majority of men that are becoming more intuitive, sensitive types. I feel like that's part of like the natural selection to help integrate the kind of like disconnected, broken feminine core that exists in men and women. And you're challenging me here with this ones, because I'm really loving what you're mentioning here, because I wouldn't expect to be this real. So I had a lecture with women recently, and it was just about this, which is so funny. Like, I don't plan this. It just goes where it needs to go. And one of the conversations we had was about masturbation. About 80% of the women can't make themselves come.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That was in my group. That was my
Wow.
anecdotal evidence through my group. And
That's
I found
a
that really
lot.
interesting, that also the same 80% couldn't express themselves
Sexually?
emotionally.
Emotionally. Oh, okay.
And what I also find is really interesting is that the relationship with sex is like this: physical body in front, emotional body behind.
Yeah.
So what you exploit is your physical body. Tell that to a man that's really masculine and connected. He's going to go, oh, no thank you,
Yeah.
right? You're not even aware of how you're using this.
Turned
Where
off.
are you?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, so you just use this as a way to hide this part of you so that you can back end meet it, right? What do you think about this? This is somebody showing up. This is what most people do. And whatever they utilize as a form of manipulation is the very thing that they do not connect to. And so you could even say, well, your physical body to meet an emotional need, because that's what you're doing. The thing about that is this, it scratches an itch. When you do this, you satisfy the soul. And then what happens isn't an attachment to the person. You don't create a like, oh man, I missed that.
What is it then?
Create a connection with them. A connection is, it doesn't trigger the nervous system in the way that an attachment does. An attachment is a survival-based interaction. A connection is a heart-based one. And the difference isn't the fevers you get when they don't text you, or when you need to see them, and finally you get to feel like yourself for 5 minutes. No, it brings the best out in both of you, and requires to bring more out of each other, to each other, for yourself.
So is that something that has to be developed, or is it just you find a person and you have that connection? How do you know? When you start getting into a sexual relationship with someone, how can you tell if that connection is there or is able to be built?
Well, a big thing for you is experiencing play. There's many components to sex. So I wanted to get back to like the orgasm conversation. That no man has made you orgasm.
No, I would never let them have that control.
Well, as you see that, so it's too damn great. It just comes out. Well, then that also goes to show that you being able to experience your own emotion makes you feel what?
My own emotion?
It
Like
makes you
sexual
Yes,
emotion?
if you were to play with yourself, for example.
Oh, it's the best. I do it all the time.
Well, you lose control.
Yeah, but I get to do it myself. So
right, so there's no vulnerability in it, but
None.
it's still a way for you to interact with that.
Transactional.
Now, let's just say that you have an insecurity here, because if there's a need for control, there's a profound insecurity. That insecurity is choosing your partners for you. I hope you know that. And you're choosing men that you can control, that don't satisfy you. If you could put them in your pocket.
The last one I couldn't control. The last one was a fucking asshole.
Well, you can't forget him, clearly, because he also helped you.
He's the
That's what I also find
worst.
is really interesting about the more masculine types, is they tell you what you need to hear as a woman, even if they're not there for you.
Literally. That's everything he did. Like, picked me apart, but was not emotionally there, supportive or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of it, because, the truth is maybe he was right.
He probably was, in a lot of ways. He reads all these self-help books and listens to all these fucking podcasts and is like, he thinks he knows everything because he's older. And
I feel that you're going to have to take it back a little bit further than this, because usually most of the time we attach the experience to the last thing that we've experienced and circulate the emotions that are not that person. So it's like you're doing the same problem. You're taking something that gave you a cut where your massive wound is and saying he cut you open.
instead of taking accountability for the part I played.
If you have a wound on your left rib and he cuts you around your left rib and you look down because you've been unconscious your whole life and see that wound, who are you going to associate that wound to?
Him.
Yeah, but he only gave you a paper cut. He didn't create that gash.
Oh, so it's taking accountability for myself.
Which means what you have to do at this point, if you came out of a relationship, is you have to take your consciousness as deep as you can to recognizing the source of this wound, and you have to go through it. Because you're dealing with a feminine wound. I hope you know that.
Yeah.
And that means that it's very difficult to understand your relationship with yourself. And then the same thing goes for men if they don't have fathers. It's like, it's directly personal to who they are. And to look at him and go, well, you cut me open. Like, most of the cuts that people give each other are paper cuts. But they're paper cuts around our core wounds that create a reaction that you could heal if you could discern the difference.
How do you learn how to discern the difference?
Well, you have to create awareness around this wound and how it's affected you and how it's changed your behaviors and how it's disconnected you and how it makes you utilize the very thing that you are as a form of transaction.
That's
right?
a lot, Naftali.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a
but
lot.
Love is a lot too.
Yeah.
So are you.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, well, that's a lot. So am I. So is love. How am I living my life that's not allowing me to incorporate this truth into it? Will heal you. And you won't be with what you were before, like whatever it is. Like this seemed to be pivotal to you coming here in your life, meaning that you want this for yourself. You really want this growth. And you talk to me a lot about connection. But if you have a wound that makes you meet your connection in little drops, you'll never have your ability to receive a connection in its waterfall. And you were telling me about that, which is you have a relationship with a man that gives you partial hits of that connection. And you maintain your single way of life by getting attention from other men that affect your relationships, right? So you see, you've used it as a way to not actually open up with the person in front of you. So you're feeding more and more dysfunctions, right? Well, what a dysfunction is a wound. It's a wound that you've had, and it could start in childhood even, and it could be fueled by ideology. And then with enough of that, then you have someone who's not even themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes sex really lets you know whether or not that's the person.
Yeah. That makes so much sense though about the little dopamine hits and then getting the external validation from multiple other men just to fill that void. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's the thing. Women are unaware of their negative emotion and how much they feel it.
And their capabilities of what they're actually doing.
And how they're able to meet it. Women have all the vices that they can meet, and they can meet them fast. And they could also adopt the mask of naivete, which is really all of their unconscious dark nature that's more manipulative than Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. It actually puts her to shame. They gave a little scribble of what female dark nature looks like. And they pitched it to kids for them to get just an idea. But it runs much darker than that, because there's a certain point where someone doesn't even have any internal beauty at all.
Right.
And if a feminine wound is not a wound around beauty and its vulnerability, then what exactly is it?
Yeah.
And you're learning what that beauty really exists, and internally it's a completely different experience, right? Let's just say you had an insecurity. How are you going to feed it? Well, you have many vices now. If you have money and you're successful, then great. You have validated yourself around, being this most top-notch woman. And maybe you can, stay young forever. At least that's what you tell yourself, right? So you keep getting work done. But you have these wounds and you're stretching them, by the way. And what ends up happening is you can rip a person in half through that. And I don't know what to do from there. I mean, that's not my field of work.
I've met people like that, though. Older people that are just so disconnected. They just radiate that energy of like being lost. And it's sad because I never want to be like that, truly. I see it all the time.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
How many people are lost. And you used another word, lost. There's people who are lost and people who are protected.
Yeah, protected.
I felt like that's a really good way to describe two kinds of people.
It's easy to categorize them when you meet someone. I feel like it's just very simple.
Yeah, they're the one or the other. So what do you think about this?
What?
If you acknowledge that there is this wound there and it changes your behaviors and that you don't want to be this lost person, and then you could say that every person's lost if they're not connected, right? Because even when they're on the right path, they don't feel like it is, right? So they're just feeling lost while moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, you're interacting with something around connection and how you meet it. And what I wanted to do is try something here, if you can bear with me for a second, because it's going to be interesting. What are emotions to you?
What are emotions? Like the definition, or do you want examples?
Like, what are they? Like, just try your best, whatever it is. What's an emotion?
A feeling in my gut towards the situation.
Now, let's take some of the situations that you had here in this past relationship.
Yeah.
What were some of the experiences that brought up the most emotion?
The feeling of dishonesty.
So, being lied to.
Being lied to. Just not being fully transparent with intentions.
Keep going.
And just that disconnect that I felt. He wasn't connected to himself, and it made me feel very unsettled.
So you described your distance from it with frustration, unsettled, annoyed. You never really described what you felt towards those things. And so what you're really interacting with is the most beautiful mirror of yourself and the distance you have from it. I mean, of course, it becomes heartbreaking when you don't incorporate vulnerability into the situation here. Yet you have to be able to, like, what's the importance of that for you? Like, it's more than just getting what you want, right? Like, there's clearly a connection. You didn't feel that. You felt sad.
It really made me realize that I was not valuing myself enough to walk away from someone who didn't deserve me. And previously, I've never had this issue, and this is going to sound very egotistical, but men have always made it very well known that they want me. They've always either chased me.
Let me pause you right there. You also said that this wasn't a man that you can control, meaning that he was a masculine man.
Very masculine.
And the ones the other before you can keep on a leash or put in your pocket and think that they could lead you anywhere. You're walking the dog, not the other way around.
Literally.
And that's like a form of feminine betrayal. I think what you're interacting with is self-betrayal.
Yeah, I feel like I let myself down. Like, I'm very disgusted with myself, honestly. I think it's gross.
Well, I think what you interacted with is that this is for all women. You're going to lose the game you play. Because you'll meet a man that's better at you than you're at your game. And when that happens, you won't know how to interact with it.
That's what it was.
You'll start deconstructing men when that's not the right answer.
That's what I'm trying so hard not to do, Naftali. I swear to you.
Yeah.
Because after
and isn't it funny? You keep bumping into men that are completely and totally disappointing you. Married men hitting on you, flying you out to their estates, and then you're meeting a guy hanging out with you until the end of the day, telling you he's engaged.
Yeah. And no, after that relationship ended, though, I really had to train my brain to not pick apart every single man, because that's where it first went. It was like that. Like, every man is just horrible, but I know that's not what it is.
Yeah, well, you're interacting with. It's not just to do with men. It has to do with your relationship with yourself that you seek men to validate. You can't do that if you want to meet your needs honestly. Like, you want to meet your need as a favor, then you can get your like little scratch itches from imp men, whatever that is. You want to feed your soul.
Longevity wise, like, I want long-term, relationships. I don't just want short-term dopamine hits. And that's what I've been doing. So.
Well, if you're aware of what that looks like, would you keep doing it?
No, I'm not doing it again.
Well, no, that's not how this works. I want to let you know that the way that this works is you becoming aware of the things that you do value, and then start becoming more clear with that. Because your highest value is security. And if you don't know that's your highest value, you are meeting it unconsciously. Security around feeling desired, security around your needs met, security around attention, security in terms of existential relief of your own feminine vulnerabilities.
How do I vet someone out for that then?
What do you mean?
What's the vetting process look like to find somebody that can make me feel secure in all of those aspects?
Well, you have to start diving deeper into what internal security looks like so you don't seek other people to meet it. You know, there's a difference between a need and a want. People throw out the word need way too much. You don't know what you need. Like, the only thing you need is God. Or everything else is you're going to experience the fate of all men. Okay, so let's start talking about what you really need and what you want. You have needs. If you're not aware of the needs that you meet, you never really meet them. And here's the thing about a real need, is that you can only satisfy it in its authentic expression, meaning it can't be through a back end.
That was really good. I like that.
Yeah, you can't hide. And,
Yeah,
and you have a
that's
tendency
really
to do that, where you'll be like, okay, I'm going to quickly get this connection really quick from a guy like this. It's fine. He's married. Doesn't really matter. But I'm just going to get it. Vampire, right? And by the way, you could even say that there's darker ways of doing that. So what we're really having a conversation about is the parts of your femininity that you reject that manifest themselves as darkness. And it's nothing but darkness. And what do you think you're going to see when you see somebody ripped open? You're going to see the innards of them. And that's very dark. It's not what you see on the surface. But here's the faith component. The faith component is the understanding that this is the beautiful bedding that allows beauty to sprout. And then now you're like, okay, I'm growing up. Because you're going to grow up. You have to grow up. Look at your worldview. Look at how you behave. Look at how juvenile it is. Look at what it makes you. Look at how it misrepresents you. And the funny part is that it's playing on the notes that you don't like to be played, like it's fucking Mozart touching on your wounds. And right now, it's playing real fast. And you're freaking the fuck out. And you're like, oh shit, I have two options. Hate men for an eternity, or maybe start internally healing these wounds that I have.
Those are the two options I see in my head.
Well, beautiful. Which one is it? What do you think you're going to go for?
The second option, so I'm here right now with you.
Yeah. Okay, that'll be fun. There is something that is very important, right? Which is understanding, this is vulnerability. Well, I want to get into this because this is more for even just other people listening than just me telling you how to live your life. You said you kept having a vulnerability issue.
So I truthfully did not even understand the definition of vulnerability until I met this man.
Oh my God.
I didn't even know
amazing.
what it meant. I looked it up on Google. I remember when he brought it up to me, I had to search it. I was like, what is vulnerability? How do you express vulnerability in a relationship? And I went down this Reddit hole, and I'm trying to figure out, how do you do that? And there's no way to logically trick your mind to do it. It's just something that comes out from within you.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
You love it this way, is that if you explain love to the mind will think you're stupid.
Yeah.
It's because it's not a question of the mind, it's for the heart. The mind can get the heart through like an angle of it, but it's not the heart. And that's where healing really is. It's where you can recognize that vulnerability is communicating through your heart. And I feel like this is a really good way to describe it. Imagine which it's a bridge to intimacy. So vulnerability is a bridge to intimacy that allows you to present a part of yourself that you've hidden your whole life to a person that you love and respect with this story that they're going to demolish you as you extend yourself in that exact position consciously.
I like that.
And then now when people go, oh man, vulnerability is for pussies, you wish you had that kind of courage.
It's scary. And I don't know, I look back on different experiences I had, and there was definitely moments of vulnerability. And I think that's why I felt sadness when the relationship ended, is you feel almost stupid, when you're vulnerable.
Well, you felt sadness after the relationship
I felt sadness because I was like, I really did try to be vulnerable. And there were instances where it came out, but you can't really try to be vulnerable. It just naturally happens.
There's no trying to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Here's what real vulnerability looks like. All right, we're going to wrestle as monsters. And as we wrestle as monsters, we'll find our hearts. You ready to do that? Most people reject everything about the part of themselves that is a vicious, cruel, harsh, critical monster that really maybe has made a commitment to growing themselves. But you have to remember that vulnerability is also bringing up the past experiences that are currently affecting the present situation and making it something it's not. And this is really powerful. And most people react to what they think it is, not what it really is, because they don't know how to be vulnerable in their communication. Because when somebody does something, you go, what was that?
You get defensive almost.
Yeah, you're totally going to get defensive because what's going to come up is a past experience, right? So when I go, what was that? You go, what do you mean? And I go, what were you doing there? Right? And maybe I'm getting a little protective there because that's totally natural, because the last time I saw somebody do that, they wanted to hurt me.
Right.
If I don't communicate that to you, I make no fucking sense.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing about human beings is like attracts like. You have an exact story about a guy doing that to you that makes you shut down because of a past experience. And then now there isn't just a fight. There's two people confirming a bias if they're not willing to get down to the bottom of it. And we talk about the bottom of it like it was something you did to me. Like, no, you just sneezed. I'm talking about all the last times in your life to where, you touch in the area of the wound and you go, ow! It's like, I did this to you. And by the way, this is something I notice when working with people, is I will touch them very gently, just like that. And they will freak the fuck out and go, you son of a bitch, the fuck you doing to me? And it's like, that was not me, that was your dad.
That's so true.
That was not me, that was your ex.
Yeah, I think,
And now when you meet somebody new and you are not aware of that, what do you think healing works? You're going to play with yourself in the garage, right? You know what I'm saying? And God's going to come down and
take it all away.
You're going to find that within you as an existential truth, and you're going to meet someone to heal that.
Yeah.
And then most people would rather be like, wait, I could heal on my own? Could I blast drugs in my basement? Right? Sign me up. I don't want this whole vulnerability thing. Because let's be real, where's the real courage?
Yeah.
It's when you internalize what you were really there to do with someone, which is to not just have a good relationship, but to perhaps bring up the things in your life that have made you see the world a certain way that stop you from existing. And so you're telling me that you have that kind of commitment? You probably don't. You probably started at seed and planting it, and there's a nice little sprout. And you're like, where's the fruit?
No, what's interesting though is at the very end of our relationship, I had gotten very vulnerable with him. I had talked about my childhood, different traumas that I've had. And because he had pushed me to open up, he was like, I know that you have these things.
Well, he wants connection as much as you do.
He wanted to know exactly why I acted the way that I did and said the things that I did. But then he left. Then he left me after I was vulnerable.
Yeah, of course. That's your self-fulfilling prophecy. He didn't abandon
my karma, you mean?
No,
my karma for anything bad I've ever done in my life?
No. That's not because you jerked off one day and then God's striking you with lightning.
That's how I took it. I was like, wow.
I mean, that's how most people take it, right? No, you have to remember this, is that him leaving you was going to happen the second you met him. That's your internal story. People leave you. After what? You open up.
Yeah.
That's what you do when you see you. You leave.
Yeah. So I spoke that into existence? Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's something you need to remember here. This is an opportunity for you to interact with that wound yourself. And we think about intimacy as something we experience with someone else. You know how terrifying intimacy is?
Because you're relying on somebody else.
No. Do you know how terrifying it is?
I mean, I don't know. Isn't it just terrifying because you're relying on somebody else to support and understand your traumas, essentially?
Abandonment makes it look cute.
Oh.
Intimacy is having someone look at the part of you that could seriously hurt them.
Like they could use it against you.
Imagine you saw the monster that you both were and loved it. Are you familiar with that monster?
I knew he was a monster and I loved it, honestly.
Of course, but what about you? You better start with yourself if you really want to start feeling like you're connected to it, because he didn't feel connected.
Yeah.
He was drawn to you because you have the same raw materials, but intimacy is an invitation into that.
What's intimacy? What's the difference between intimacy and vulnerability?
Well, the one's a bridge to the other.
Okay.
Vulnerability is the process to intimacy, and a person needs to be able to experience the kindness outside of their past experiences of things that have happened. It's so funny that people are drawn to the things that have hurt them. Like, a lot of men that I'll work with are drawn to the very vocal, forward, shadow types, darker types. And then you ask them about their relationship with the men that have hurt them. They're all those things, the men that they envy. And for women, it's, the very forward, direct, critical type that gets the things that she wants. And it's like, you're aware of what's really happening here is that you've rejected this and you've created distance from it, but a part of you is drawn to it because it's in you. But how the hell can you change if you're not willing to accept that every single part of you that is no longer this like purity thing looking for connection, whatever you made it, like this butterfly in a dandelion field. No, I'm talking like you saw every single part of your darkness, because that's exactly what intimacy is. It's looking into that, and your relationship with that is really poor. You will never have anybody look into it. It's a door that you lock to yourself. What makes you think you'll invite anybody in it? And I had enough of people telling themselves that they're emotionally connected when their relationships keep saying they're not. Like you really want to see who somebody is, just ask them their life, right? Oh, when's the last time you felt connected? Oh, years ago. I can't even remember. I was like 16. There was this one girl in high school, and we like made out once. And it's like, well, what about since then? Like nothing, right? And it's...
So why is it so easy for me to feel connection towards friends or colleagues or other people, but I struggle so much in a relationship aspect?
Well, because that plays into the vulnerability part, right?
Because you don't have to be so vulnerable with your colleagues or your friends necessarily?
You know, when two people are the same pieces of the puzzle, they could only get as close as two pieces that are like, you know, you connect with each other on this level, but on an intimacy level is like this, it's emerging, right? That means you're connecting yourself back to an initial whole.
Right.
That's scary. That's a completely different thing, because that's an invitation to what you don't know and making that part of who you are for the rest of your life. And so an intimate relationship really screams to the vulnerabilities of the feminine and to the masculine, right? Because I said this to you, that if a man approaches a woman, he's essentially risking everything.
Yeah.
Because she's the very thing that can keep him on the path or remove him from it. And the same thing goes for women. It's like you can sign up to a tyranny for the rest of your life.
Can.
And remember, that's the conversation of why it gets so noisy.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it gets so noisy because you're interacting with these vulnerabilities at a very deep level, but you refuse to give them the awareness they deserve.
Right.
So your sensitivity becomes a burden, so does your emotions. But these really all have to do with your existential beliefs about life, which are realistic beliefs you should have,
right,
that get you to connect to these things. Because why would you? Like, you have to think about, like, what are your values? What do you really prioritize? Is it depth or is it survival, right? Is it love or is it transaction? Is it sex or is it security?
What if it's the latter? Like what if it is transactional? What if it is, you know, whatever else you just said? Does that mean I'm a bad person? What do you do then?
Well, that I like. That was really honest. That was how you feel about it. Which is, there's an underlying shame to these parts of you that are self-interested, that exist. If you're not aware of how self-interested and dark you are, you'll never know kindness.
I really honestly think I am very dark in some situations, but what do you do about that then? Do you go get baptized or like...
I fucking love that. Yeah, you go get baptized. Yeah, become a reborn again Christian, repress it all, create a new personality. It will be different this time, I promise.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you do?
This is integration, and I wanted to like talk a little bit more about that's what it's going to look like for you. A lot of women are afraid of how selfish they are. And they usually get to see how selfish they are when they meet a man that tells them what they're doing is bullshit. And then they get hungry for that man because they gave them something their soul needs. And I've noticed that this happens to women. It's like they go around, they're like chewing on bullshit man sandwiches, and then one day they fucking bite into a brick and they break their tooth. And they're like, oh, right? And it's like, see, you play around, you get bit in the ass, right? And then now you attach yourself to that thing, and it's like, this is not going to end well for you until you start recognizing that you've been feeding the dysfunction until you hit a wall. And that wall is a truth about men that women don't like. They rule over you. It's just a matter of when you meet one, you'll realize that truth exists even when you told yourself, no, it's not. So that's the vulnerability conversation. Yeah, integration of your self-interest is really powerful, because what we're talking about is your dark nature. A lot of women don't want to be seen as selfish, right? Who wants to be with a selfish woman?
It's at our core in so many ways.
It's at our core. Everyone's selfish.
Yeah.
It's a question of if they're conscious or not.
Yeah.
And you know what happens to women when they start integrating their selfish desires? They start recognizing a part of them that exists to give.
So they become more nurturing.
They become more nurturing, they become more caring, their sex becomes better, they're more connected to their body, they know what they want, they can communicate it, they have a voice, they have expression, and then they're now start to flourishing into beauty, and they're like, with something so dark? Yeah, name something that doesn't have a level of darkness and a transcended beauty that comes with it. In fact, you could say, well, that's the bedding of it. So yeah, the self-interest part is going to kill you. It's gonna mess you up in terms of when you interact with it. Does that mean you're a bad person? What makes a bad person?
Someone that has intentions to hurt someone.
What if those intentions were unconscious?
It's not a bad person.
What if they didn't address that it was unconscious for long periods of time?
It's naive.
What if they adopted naivete?
They're still not a bad person.
Well, there's a certain point where they do become one, unconsciously.
What if they don't have the intellectual capabilities to acknowledge any of that?
It's the importance of people being able to stand up for themselves. It's actually very interesting, is that if there's a certain point where people's unconsciousness begins to spiral until they hit something hard enough that gets them to wake up, to recognize their unconscious behaviors. And now here's something really interesting. Imagine you fed people's narcissistic human nature, because it's part of human nature. And you made them so self-interested that they completely lack and disregard everyone they meet. Because that's kind of been your relationship history until you now, why is it not working? Like, because
hit a wall.
You hit a wall with your dysfunction.
Sure did.
Which means I'm going to have to let go. I'm going to, everything I pursued, I'm going to take it back down to the very core I wanted to leave.
Yes.
This is the manifestation of your wound.
Yeah.
And now this is the manifestation of your unaddressed wound. What do you think is the manifestation of your addressed wound?
I have no idea.
It's the right answer. You have no idea.
I have no idea.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because it might not be the Carly we're talking to right now.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, right? And I think that's partially what goes on, which is this can't be it. There has to be.
There has to be something else.
There has to be something else.
Yeah.
And I noticed that at the core of the feminine is connection. Mm-hmm. If you live without that as a woman, you're a very miserable woman.
I see it all the time. These women.
Very
I see
miserable.
it on your clients all the time. Very miserable.
Yeah, and it's hard to even be able to even experience the sadness that so many people are experiencing here. You know, we've become so good at this.
Mm-hmm. The masking.
We forgot how to feel, and we consider other people more than we consider ourselves, and so we then develop altruistic narratives to avoid the fact that we're self-betraying, vainful, self-obsessed narcissists at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Because really what you're doing is you're not actually serving your best interest. You're making love to a mirror, not yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's in vain.
Yeah, it's true.
I wanted to know a little bit about how you're feeling about this conversation, because
I feel good.
I feel that most people have a naive perception of what healing looks like. It really looks like opening doors and guiding the person through those doors.
Yeah.
And getting them to face the one thing they've been running from. And spending time with it shows me the person that they are. Mm-hmm. And every person needs to see who they are, and you will only see that in the face of adversity. Mm-hmm. And that adversity is yourself. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I really want this. Well, how many days did you spend facing this part of you that made you question if you're a bad person or not? Because that's really what we were talking about, you know, mm-hmm. which is a shame that you have around this. Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting to people that spend time knowing that that's a part of them? They go out of their way to protect people from themselves, and they learn how to be vulnerable, because the most dangerous thing in your life is you to the people you love.
I love that.
And now you see the narcissistic narratives go out the window, and you recognize the responsibility of your life, and then you're also like, oh my God, I have power. Mm-hmm. I'm connected to something that can. I'm not powerless. Mm-hmm. And then now you want to talk about values. Oh, we can talk about values. Because now you're no longer running away from the part of yourself that challenges who you don't want to be.
Right.
Now you know who you are. With a little bit of love, mm-hmm. you can be who you want to be. Because that's the manifestation of it. You give love to what is, it transforms into what can be.
Yeah.
And that's also true to what happens to a man, right? Well, this is who he is. He's showing all of these characters, this is who I am. Let me love it. Transforms. Mm-hmm. From beast into a prince. And from a princess to a queen.
One day.
Or I wouldn't say a princess, just a village girl to a queen, right? It happens pretty quick.
Perfect.
What do you feel about this whole conversation? What I've spoken about? What does it make you feel?
It's interesting how you said you hit a wall at one point in your life and you start doing self-reflection, because that's exactly how I felt after this relationship. It's also very interesting to me, because if people don't have you as a resource, how do they navigate this time of their life? You know, they either turn to drugs, alcohol to mask it. They turn to hating men and, you know, never dating again. Where do they find the, resources to get help to navigate themselves through this time of their life? Mm-hmm. I'm really thankful that I have you in my life during this period, because I don't understand where else you would go or how you would figure it out by yourself.
It's a really, really good question. You know, you're not alone. That's the first thing that comes to mind. You're not alone. It's a lie that your ego tells yourself. We need each other. There's no question about it. But you have to be able to address, like, I'm not alone.
Yeah. No, it was just very eye-opening to me because that's exactly how I felt. And I knew that I had to work on things within myself. And you brought a lot to my attention that I need to focus on, like the values, for example.
Yeah, and you know, it's purely around your own self-interest of what you want.
Yeah.
And it's funny how that's the one thing you reject that you feel shame around. You know what would happen if you faced that? You would feel a lot of shame that that exists. And you would seek validation that you're a good person.
Right.
If you don't feed the dysfunction, you'll be fine. Because you'll be actually kissing the wound for once.
Yeah.
Opposed to, you know, constantly like, oh, it's going to start closing. I'm giving it too much love, right? Like you're spending time around it. Of course it's going to start healing. There's going to be a natural alignment that happens. And so look, for people that feel this way, I mean, the best thing you can do is like, get healthy, like get physically healthy.
Yeah.
If your mind is a mess, you're not going to be in touch with anything intuitively that's guiding you, you know, and of course, maybe your mind is a mess. Well, then start writing, write other people's shit if you need to. But your ideas no longer become things in your head. They become real when they're on paper. And I feel that we are in a disassociative society because, you know, you're looking at this, meaning that your whole life is, you're a spectator. So that's already going to create distance from your life. And when you start to write the things that are in your head that are cluttering it, you start to create more of an association to the things that are there in reality. So it's like a weave that you're running through. Also, watch good film. And as crazy as it sounds, it's the 21st century art form. But you know, like people talk about like getting connected to the soul. It was watching Matthew McConaughey in a collapsing relationship with my legs crossed going, what am I seeing here? I don't know what it is. I don't care. I love this. And then sometimes, you know, you act the characters out, but there are notes that are played in this that wake up the spirit. And if you really want to think about elevating a consciousness, what you're really doing is waking up a soul. And you could think of a soul as a consciousness without limitation. Meaning it doesn't just extend to your body, it exists outside of that too. So, and then the most important, I would say, out of all of that is start identifying your beliefs, the beliefs that you have about yourself, and then the values that you have unconsciously adopted. Everybody has a system of values, whether they like it or not. There's a difference between saying this is who you are and this is what I believe in. When you say this is who you are, it's most likely something that you have created as an identity to protect you from who you really are, which is a selfish son of a bitch who only wants money, power, and all of these things. That's great. Maybe you should write that down. Then what do you value? Being real. If you can get down to that, you can give yourself the room to listen. And if you start recognizing that that's really what happens, and that's what happened to me, because you asked me that in the car, you were like, hey, where did this come from? I tapped out and I said, I want to listen. I don't want to die on this hill, because I was going to die on that hill. And, you know, dying on the hill of mediocrity, which means aiming for the middle and hitting dead center. And that's where Naftali Moses died. So I just want you to know that, you know, I was resurrected at one point. And you could say, well, that resurrection comes from a curious spirit. And if you ever feel like that curiosity is diminished, then that's usually where a person's in trouble. So they're not alone with that. And there's the reason why I do what I do is so that people don't have to be alone with that I can help out. And I've created many systems for people to get that kind of information and guidance, even where I'm on board with that. And I feel that there's a reason why I do this. It's so that I can give back, because I want people to recognize that truth that exists in their life that I can share with them and help them get closer to.
I love that. It's beautiful.
Well, wonderful, Carly. Let's do this again.
Thank you so much, Naftali.